Hello, we lost the connection. Sorry about that. Hopefully everybody will find us now. And if you can delete that other one, that'd be good. I'm not sure whether you can or not. I don't know what. So hopefully others who join will join us over here. Okay, look like they're finding us. They're not. Someone could let them know that we lost the connection and we're reconnected here. We'd appreciate it. Okay. Hopefully people find us, so we'll give another minute or so for those who are on the other page to find us. If you're friends with them, let them know that we had a bit of technical problem, lost them, and I see someone was joining back. So just let the others that you know where we are, that we are live. We'll give about another minute to give them a chance to find us again. Sorry about that. Okay, and hopefully we won't lose you again. If we do, just stay tuned. I'll come right back in. Let me just check my browser here to make sure everything we look okay now. Okay, let's get going with tonight's lesson. Tonight we're going to be looking from the book of Ruth. We're going to look at Ruth, the second chapter for the most part. Ruth second chapter is what we're going to look at tonight. And tonight's subject will be exposure-proof trust. Exposure-proof trust. And as always, you follow on Minister Jackson. She takes very, very good notes. And you also know Minister Jackson, occasionally I'll say something that I don't really mean. So tonight's lesson is exposure-proof trust is what we're going to look at in Ruth 2. All right. And so in order to do that, we're going to look at let's see which version am I using tonight. My Bible's here on the left. I have the King James Version open, so I'll go with it. Ruth 2. Tonight we're going to look at exposure-proof trust. All right. Now, as we start to think about this subject of exposure-proof trust, we recognize that there will be times that you will expose yourself because you are trusting God. All right. Sometimes we think of exposure. We think we're only exposing ourselves and we're not trusting God. But there will be times that you really are exposing yourself and you're trusting God. And that's what we're going to look at. How do we deal with this exposure-proof trust? In other words, that trust we have, we're trusting God and we're exposing ourselves. That's what I'm calling exposure-proof trust. You get it? All right. So there will be time when you really will expose yourself, not because you're not trusting God, but because you are trusting God. All right. And then you'll have to put even more trust in God. All right, to believe that when you expose yourself, it won't damage your heart, won't hurt your feelings too bad, okay? Won't bruise your ego too bad, won't affect your emotions too bad, all right? Because what you really don't want is a letdown, all right? So we're gonna look at that trust tonight. What you really don't want is a letdown. You know you're trusting God and you know you expose trusting God. The Lord gives you a word and you get upset and say, I'm a little nervous, I'm a little afraid if I say it, is anybody going to accept it? Or are they going to kind of turn a ugly face at me or something? You're trusting God, okay? And so in order to get through that, you're going to need what I call exposure-proof trust. To get through, you're trusting God, but at the same time, you're exposing yourself to trust God. You got it? All right? All right, ready? So let's start here by looking at the scripture, and then we'll give you a few more pointers as we go. Now, first of all, I'm going to skip chapter one of Ruth, but let me just tell you where it is. Ruth has left her homeland to be in a homeland with a mother-in-law, Naomi. That's the bottom line. You got it? All right? And now that in itself will bring a certain level of exposure to you. When you have to leave an area that you're very familiar with to go to an area where you're not as familiar, maybe an area where you're popular, now you're not popular, area where you speak the language and understand how to do things, and now you really don't get how they do things here, that will bring a certain level of exposure to you, even though you're trusting God. And that's where Ruth, is going to find herself. She's going to find herself with a certain level of exposure because she's trusting God in a land that was not originally of her choosing. And here's a point for you right away. Even when you go to a land where that you didn't choose, God is still God there. So whether you choose the land or whether you push the land or whether you accidentally end up in the land, you need to recognize that God is still the ruler of all the land. I don't care where it is. All right. So let's take a look here at this subject of exposure-proof trust. All right. And I'll try to keep saying that. All right. So let's pick up in Ruth 2. All right. Ruth 2, it says, and Naomi, all right, that's the mother-in-law, had a kinsman, a husband, a mighty man of wealth, and of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let's go to the field and glean ears of corn after him in sight, that I may find grace. And she said unto herself, go, my daughter. Notice here the first thing that's happening here, and this is something you want to be aware of when you're dealing with exposure-proof trust. You are going to expose yourself, but notice what she said. She said that I might find grace. One of the things that people with exposure-proof trust do, they don't force themselves on anyone. Let me say that again. People, you have to be exposed, but you don't force yourself on anyone. If they don't want you to preach at their church, say thank you very much, hallelujah, sit in the pews, enjoy the service, and go home. Okay? You've exposed yourself that you are an evangelist, you are a pastor, you are a preacher of the gospel. Okay? But they don't want to receive it. That's okay. If the favorite girls club doesn't want you to sit at their table, don't worry about it. You want to seek God's grace in what you do. All right? If they don't want you to play on their basketball team, play on their court, don't worry about it. Never force yourself upon someone. All right? You get it? You're already exposing yourself as it is, but those with exposure-proof trust don't force themselves upon anybody. All right. So, and she went and came and she gleaned in the field after the reaper. And if you've been with me, you know I skip about as I read. I'm at the 3rd verse now. Verse 3, yeah. And it happened that part of the field belonged to Boaz, who was a kindred. So part of the field belonged to Boaz. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he saw the reapers and the Lord be with you. And he answered them, the Lord bless thee. Then said Boaz unto the servant, who's that over there reaping? Who's that damsel? Who's that girl? And the servant said to her, she's a reaper from Moabite, Naomi's country. All right. So here's something happening right now. Ruth is in a situation where she's exposing the fact that she needs an income and she needs help. And also, she's at this time, men and women would need or want a husband. So she's vulnerable right now. All right. But look what God has done. And this is what God will do for those of you with exposure-proof trust. She does not have to change in her standards and lower standards for Boaz to meet her. God will set the situation up. So if you have exposure-proof trust, he will allow you to catch the eye from someone to help you meet your needs. You got it? So God's going to allow someone to observe you and be willing to help you meet your needs. You get it? And that's what's happening here with Boaz. In other words, you see, with exposure-proof trust, it looks like it's by happenstance, or it looks like by chance, or it looks like serendipity. But those events of your life, when you're walking under a spirit of exposure-proof trust, those are not accidental. That's God's divine setup. I declare tonight, some of you have been divinely set up tonight. You're going to meet someone or something or some situation that's going to meet your need. Look for it. Hashtag, I'm looking for it. All right? Your life is not an accident. It's not happened by happenstance or chance. You've got to start to see your life as God sending divine setups. People who walk on the spirit of exposure-proof trust look at their situations as it must be a divine setup from God. All right? If your car doesn't start tomorrow morning, might be a good thing, keeps you out of trouble, or it might delay you from an accident down the highway. You've got to start to see God's hand in it. You follow? That's where it was happening to Ruth. Now, we're observing this after the fact, but Ruth is going through it, and notice what testimony was, that I might find grace, I might find favor. Here it is. People with exposure-proof trust will put themselves in a position for someone to show them favor. All right? And she said, I pray, let's see, okay. So verse 7. And she said, I pray you, let me glean in the field and go after the reapers of the sheaves. In other words, after the people have pulled the corn, there's some corn or wheat or grain left over, and she goes out to get it. So he came and he had continued even for the morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. All right. Then said Boaz to Ruth, hearest thou not, my daughter? Don't go glean in another field, neither go anywhere else. But I'm going to provide enough gleaning for you to do here. Rev is paraphrasing as I read. I think we're going to make a switch here. Just a minute. Just a minute. Okay. All right. Now, verse 8. So Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, listen to me. Do not go glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the fields where the men are harvesting and follow after the women. And I have told the men that they should leave some corn for you, and they should provide water for you to drink. When you walk out by faith and take a faith action towards your next destiny, towards your next season in life, you have to carry with you a spirit that says, that recognizes that you're going to be exposed, but because you're walking under God's favor, you're going to be exposure proof as long as you trust God. If you do that, he's going to set up the situation to favor you. And that's what he's doing for Ruth. And we'll explain to you a little bit better in a minute. All right. So here it is. She's going there. And now she's caught Boaz's attention. And Boaz is making sure that she's taken care of. That's favor on her life. And I'm going to stop at verse 12 in a minute. At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, why have I found favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? A foreigner. Listen, it doesn't matter what nationality you are, what ethnicity you are, God will still show you favor. Boaz replied, I have been told about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and your mother and your homeland and came to live with people you did not know before. Boaz is recognizing that this woman is a woman of great character. If you are to walk with exposure-proof trust, your character will be your testimony. Your character, your personal character will be your testimony. That's why it's very important, if you want to receive this type of favor from God with exposure-proof trust, that you monitor your own character. Your character should be one that speaks for itself. Ask yourself tonight, do I have a character that speaks well of me about how I walk and stand before God? Verse 12 and the last one we'll read tonight. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. In other words, a blessing was spoken over her life. And I speak a blessing over your life tonight, that you walk with exposure-proof trust, and God is about to turn your situation around, and he's about to bless you in a miraculous way. Now, I did a lot of reading there at a fast pace. So allow me to paraphrase what we just read and tell you about exposure-proof trust. We have this woman, Ruth, who had a situation where she could not meet her own needs on her own. Maybe she needed cancer treatment. Maybe she needed diabetes medicine. Maybe she needed home care. Maybe she needed a career counselor. Maybe she needed a tutor. Maybe she needed someone to help her with her kids. Maybe she needed someone to guide her in her growth in her career. She had a need, and you maybe have a need. In order to move toward her next season of destiny, she had to expose herself that she did have that need. Likewise, in your life, there's going to come a time when where you have to go next in your season is going to cause you to expose yourself or be exposed. Someone's going to discover that you're not as smart as they thought you were. They're going to discover that you're not as gifted as they thought you were. Someone's going to discover that you don't have the monies you look like you have. Be ready to trust God in those exposure seasons. Someone's going to discover that you didn't do as good a job as you thought raising your children. Be ready to trust God. Someone's going to think you're not doing it. You didn't do quite as good a job at pastoring or running your ministry or your company. Be ready to trust God. Exposure-proof trust is that trusting God that we have when life turns a corner or meets us at a crossroad where our season is changing and we cannot do it all our own. There will come a time when you just can't do it all your own. Trust God, take the next faith action step, and expect God to cover you in that next season. That's what Ruth did. So here it is. She had respect for the person that owned the field. If you're going to walk with exposure-proof trust, some of you don't walk with exposure-proof trust. Here's why: because you're too much of a bulldog. You want to fight everybody about everything. Okay? Someone beats you to the park, you want to jump out and attack them. Okay? Someone says something bad about you on Facebook, you spend the rest of your data plan on your cell phone trying to get them back. Some of you don't know how to walk with exposure-proof trust because exposure-proof trust requires that you maintain the quality of your character. You got it? That's what Ruth is doing. She maintained the quality of character, even though she was gleaning in a field. And she was out there with a lot of men, but she maintained her integrity. So much so that Boaz ordered his men, watch out for her and help her to maintain her integrity. And that's what God would send into your life. He would send somebody into your life to help you maintain your character. And then he spoke a blessing over her. All right? You get it? Now, let me take a look at some notes here that I've made about this. Okay, yeah. You see, exposure-proof trust is trust you need when you take a faith action, and it could leave you open to potential ridicule or shame or awkwardness. How many of you have had to take that before? Where there's something you have to go and you feel a little awkward about doing it. You know you have to do it, but you feel awkward. That's when you call on your spirit of exposure-proof trust. You say to the Lord, Lord, I'm exposing myself. Help me to get through it. You get it? And he will keep you in such a way that your exposure will not bring shame upon you. All right? You get it? So that's what it's for. All right? You see, it's a little bit like this. Let's see. Example of exposure-proof trust. Exposure-proof trust is like when you ladies say to that young man before you marry him, I love you, and you expect him to say it back, and it doesn't come off his lips right away. And when it finally does, it comes off a little awkward, not too smooth. You expose yourself. You expose your heart to let him know that I really love you. And he's still wondering whether he loves you. You get it? Exposure-proof trust in God is what you need in awkward situations like that. All right? All right? Exposure-proof trust is when what you wives need when you ask your husband a question, baby, you still love me? And he say, just a minute, I'm watching football, or I'm watching baseball, or knitting, or whatever he does. You get it? You need that exposure-proof trust where there's potential for your heart to be broken in the midst of you showing who you really are. You decide to get up one Sunday in service and you just praise dance all over the building, and folk look at you like, why did she do that? You get it? Exposure-proof trust will get you through that where you don't really see it in your spirit. You'll see it with your eyes, but your spirit won't receive it. So exposure-proof trust allows your spirit not to receive the hurt and the harm. Let me say it again. The potential hurt and harm. Exposure-proof trust allows your spirit not to receive the potential hurt and harm or shame that it could. All right? Because there will be a season when you're trying to get to your next destiny, your next destiny level, which is where Ruth wanted to get to her next destiny level. But to get there, She had to expose herself. You will too. You cannot get there without doing it. It just does not happen that people get to their next level without exposing themselves. In other words, there's a risk in moving to the next level. But that's where you need to be in order for God to fulfill your purpose. You must get to the next level. Hashtag, I must get to the next level. And if that's your testimony, then you've got to be ready to expose yourself. Now, exposure-proof trust doesn't mean you go tell your business on Facebook, or you start telling yourself, or you do something, well, I'm doing exposure-proof trust. And there's a term they use today, something about when they tell all their secrets. I can't remember. Anyway, there's a phrase that people like to use where they think it's okay to tell their secrets. I'm not one of those people that think it's okay. Listen, don't expect to read Facebook and see all my secrets. You will not see them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about purposefully expose yourself. I'm talking about exposure-proof trust is trust that trusts God when you must open up to getting to the next level. Exposure-proof trust is trusting God when you must open up to get to the next level. Full disclosure is the word I was looking for. There's this thing called full disclosure. I'm not in corporate America anymore. I'm independent. But in corporate America, people like to sit in me and say, well, I'm going to give full disclosure. I do not believe in giving full disclosure about my life. None your business. That's what I'm not talking about. All right, you get it? But there will be times when the fact that I'm from Newton, Georgia, small town, USA, will come out and expose me when people think perhaps you're from the city or what have you. You guys already knew that. You get it? So watch for that. All right. So let me give you the definition here of what I call exposure-proof trust. All right. You ready? Here we go. Exposure-proof trust is trust that lets you take a faith step outside of your norm such that it positions you for the next season of your life. I'll repeat that. Exposure-proof trust is trust that lets you take a faith step outside of your norm, whatever your norm is. Okay? I tend to be a bit loud. I'm louder than I am soft. So my norm would be to be soft for a change. You get it? All right? So follow? So outside of your norm, such that it positions you for the next season of your life in a different field of life that stabilizes your future. So, all right, I'll repeat the whole definition. Exposure-proof trust is trust that lets you take a faith step outside of your norm such that it positions you for the next season of your life in a different field in life that stabilizes your future. Now, that different field may be somewhere within your same geographic area. It may be in the same ministry, the same life, but there will be something unique within that. There will be something unique in your marriage that moves you to another level, but it has to expose you in order to do it. Perhaps you have to expose your weaknesses finally to your husband or to your spouse. That, you know, hon, I'm really not that good at finance. And you thought they were the entire time. There's some exposure. Or you say, well, hon, really, I'm more shy, but I've always pretended that I'm not shy. I'm really more reserved. There will be something that will expose it. Or you have to admit to someone, you know, really, I made it this far, but I'm really not that bright in certain areas. But I'm really tough enough to get the job done. That area of exposure will sometime come. But when you have exposure-proof trust, God will get you through the emotions, the hurt, and the pain, and the potential shame that might come. God's going to do that for you. All right. He's going to exposure-proof you so that you can go ahead and do something you've been afraid to do because you don't want anybody to find out you're really not that good at it, or you don't want to expose your weaknesses. Exposure-proof trust is what you need to get through that, because to get to that next level, you're going to have to expose yourself. All right. Let me give you these features before we end tonight's lesson. There are 5 features I have for you tonight for those people who walk on the spirit exposure-proof trust. And many people walk on this spirit. They really do. That's what they look like. They're very confident. They are confident because they're walking in a spirit of exposure-proof trust. They recognize that they're exposing themselves. They recognize they're taking risks. They recognize it might not go the way they thought it would, but they take it anyway because their spirit is guarded by exposure-proof trust. 5 features that you'll see in people with exposure-proof trust. Number 1, a sense that God is with you. If you're going to walk like this, you've got to wake up every day and look for that sense that God is with me. I'm going to the supermarket. The soup's going to be on sale because God said it's going to be on sale. And if it's not on sale, when I open my wallet, I'm going to have enough money in there to buy what I need. All right. You've already filled up the cart expecting it to happen. You get it? A sense that God is with you. You made a decision to live in this city or that city, buy this home, that home. A sense that God is with you. Okay. Number 2, you take a faith step outside of your comfort zone. So number 1, sense that God is with you. Number 2, take a faith step outside of your comfort zone. You will not get to the next level staying where you are and staying in that comfort zone. You're going to have to expose yourself. Someone's going to have to discover that you're really not that good on computers. Someone's going to have to discover that you're really not that good at doing research. Someone's going to discover that you're really not that good at pronouncing this or doing that. But if or when it happens, you're going to have the same blessing upon you that Ruth had upon her. And I speak that blessing over your life tonight. Number 3, discipline to hold to the standards of God. Number 3, discipline to hold to the standards of God. You know the standards God put before you, hold to them. Number 4, work with God's best intent in mind. Work with God's best intent in mind. Hashtag, I'm ready to work my field. Hashtag it, I'm ready to work my field. And when you work that field, work with God's best intention in mind. That I believe God's going to work this out. I believe it's going to come out well. Oh, I know I'm taking some risks. I know I'm not good at this, but God's going to mend and he's going to overshadow anything that would keep it from happening. And number 5, recognize God's favor towards you. Recognize God's favor towards you. One of the things that some people miss when they're struggling, going through things and look like things aren't going well, you've got to say, wait a minute, I've got God's favor on my life. Okay? When you recognize that, it will lift your spirit. You'll recognize I'm walking exposure proof. Doesn't mean that people won't see it, but I know it won't hurt me. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to keep walking. Okay? Like for some people, you've had to move to different states where you don't have any family around. You're walking on exposure proof. Excuse me. You have to walk with a spirit of exposure proof there because it's vulnerable. People are going to discover that you're lonely. They're going to discover that you're lonely. Okay? But God is going to protect you and shield you in your season of loneliness so that no weapon formed against you shall ever prosper. All right? So those are your 5 principles or features of exposure-proof trust. You see, what exposure-proof trust does is it reminds you that God has your best interest in mind, especially at vulnerable times. God has your best interest in mind, especially at vulnerable times. We all are vulnerable at times. I'm vulnerable in teaching this lesson because for some, they will take clips of this and they will make other things out of them. That's not what we intended them to be. But in order to do this and bless those that we bless, I have to expose myself. For others, they'd be wondering, why didn't you do it in your studio or do it here or do it there? You see, you will expose yourself. Many times when you're trying to help people, you will expose yourself. But God has your best interest in mind, especially when you're vulnerable. You'll set up a ministry and you expect 100 girls to show up and only 2 will show up. And you invited all the dignitaries to witness your program, but only 2 people showed up to help someone or to help yourself or to get to the next level will make you vulnerable. But God has your best interest in mind. And there are times when you'll have to just simply trust God, because the next level is really calling you and drawing you in that direction. That's when you call upon your spirit of exposure-proof trust. You simply say, Lord, shield me from the impact. Each time you get up to do something you think is meaningful, ask the Lord to simply shield me from the impact, and he'll do it. And if you ask him to do that and you walk with a proper character, he'll shield you every time, as he did for Ruth. Okay? All right? So when you trust God for your next season, of life, he will reward it with assurance that your exposure will not damage your identity in him. When you trust God for your next season of life, he will reward it with assurance that your exposure will not damage your identity in him. Uplift your faith with exposure-proof trust and watch God make a difference in your life. This is Dr. Anthony Revis, Faith Ministries Church, Midland, Michigan, USA. God bless.